I remember the way the paper felt in my hands, soft from age, a little wrinkled at the corners, still sealed. And I remember Micah's voice, steady and curious, holding that envelope like it was some ancient treasure. He didn't know what he'd found. Not really, but I did. That moment in our dimly lit basement changed everything. Let me back up just a second. My name is Serena Blake. I'm 39 years old, a mom, and a part-time interior designer. For the last 15 years, I've been married to Caleb, accountant, father, Sunday griller, calm in a crisis, the kind of man who reads the news out loud in the morning like he's giving a TED Talk, steady, reliable, and, as I would soon learn, deeply secretive. We live in Asheville, North Carolina. Nice little neighborhood, big maple trees, quiet streets. I know every neighbor's name and dog breed. To anyone looking in, we were the picture of a stable family. I even thought so myself. For years, I told myself Caleb was just private, not cold, not secretive, just contained. He never liked talking about his family, especially not his father, Elias. I used to ask early on in our marriage, back when I thought I had the right to know everything about the man I married. "What was your dad like?" I'd say. Or, "Why don't we ever visit the old family home you mentioned once?" He'd wave me off with a chuckle or a sigh. "It's complicated," he'd say. "Let the past stay buried." That phrase stuck with me. Let the past stay buried. Funny choice of words. Micah, our only child, is 13 now. Bright, a little nerdy, asks too many questions. But he's good, the kind of good that surprises you. He's close to me in the way sons often are with mothers, especially when the father keeps parts of himself walled off. Micah always noticed things, like how Caleb changed the subject whenever family history came up, or how there were never any pictures of Grandpa Elias around the house. One Saturday, Micah and I were reorganizing the basement, just spring cleaning. Dust, old Christmas decorations, boxes of Micah's baby clothes. Then we found it. A weathered cardboard box tucked behind the water heater, sealed with duct tape. Micah ripped it open like it was an adventure. "Mom, these look like legal papers." And then he held up the envelope, cream-colored, thick, with Caleb's name written on the front in formal cursive. "Is this why Dad never talks about Grandpa's house?" he asked, tilting his head the way he does when something doesn't add up. I didn't answer right away. My heart was racing, but I kept my face still. I didn't want to scare him. So I smiled. Not a fake smile, not quite. It was complicated, the kind of smile you wear when the final puzzle piece clicks into place and it confirms something you never wanted to believe. I said, "Let's ask him." Micah blinked. "Like, now?" I shook my head, brushing the dust off my jeans. Let's ask him, at his birthday dinner. It was only 3 days away, a small dinner at home with Caleb's closest people, his brother Darren, his sister-in-law Emily, our friends from the neighborhood. We had it every year. Laughter, wine, speeches. This year, I decided, there would also be a little truth. I slipped the envelope into my purse, gave Micah a reassuring nod, and told him we'd talk more later. I didn't want him worried, but inside I was already planning everything. The timing, the seating arrangement, even what I'd wear. Not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted the moment to land, clean, sharp, impossible to wiggle out of. That envelope had been sitting in our house for years, undisturbed, unmentioned, intentionally hidden. I don't know what made Caleb stash it there and think it would never resurface. But life has a funny way of unearthing things when you're least prepared. This wasn't just about money or a house. This was about trust, about lies layered so quietly into the fabric of our lives that I almost didn't notice them. Almost. And now I was done pretending I didn't know what I knew. The table was set, the wine was chilling, and the truth was coming, served right alongside the birthday cake. Before everything fell apart, or maybe I should say, before it all finally made sense, our life was fine. That's the word I used when people asked, "How are things?" "Oh, fine." We lived in a 2-story Craftsman just outside Asheville, the kind of neighborhood where kids still ride bikes in the street, and someone's always posting about lost cats on the Facebook group. Caleb and I had been there since Micah was born. 13 years in the same house, same school district, same grocery store. And for a long time, I thought stability was the same as happiness. And maybe it was in some way. I met Caleb when I was 23. I had just finished a design internship in Atlanta, waiting tables to pay rent, living with my college roommate. He came in one night, alone, ordered a burger and a neat scotch, and left me a tip that had more zeros than my paycheck. I thought it was a mistake. When I chased him down in the parking lot, he said, it wasn't the food, it was the conversation. That was Caleb. Charismatic when he wanted to be, magnetic in a quiet way. A man who didn't talk much, but made you feel chosen when he did. He was already doing well back then, worked in finance, had inherited his father's analytical brain, as he once joked, but what he didn't inherit, apparently, was his father's affection. Elias Blake. I only ever saw one picture of him, framed in Caleb's office drawer, not even on display. A stern man in a tailored gray suit, standing beside a classic Lincoln Continental. He looked like someone who'd own land and secrets. When I asked about him in our early years together, Caleb would just shrug. We weren't close, he'd say. Different values. Sometimes I'd push a little. What happened? When was the last time you spoke? But the wall would come up fast. He'd never get angry, just distant. Like I'd tripped an alarm in a room I didn't know was locked. So I stopped asking. I stopped asking about the house in South Carolina Caleb mentioned once in a story, then never again. I stopped asking why we never visited his childhood home, or why his brother Darren only ever talked about their mother, who died when they were teenagers. Caleb kept the past in a box, and I let it stay closed. Our marriage functioned. We split bills, shared holidays. He coached Micah's soccer team for a year. He gave me space to start a small interior design business after Micah started school. He wasn't abusive. He wasn't cruel. He was safe, predictable. Quiet in a way that sometimes felt peaceful and sometimes felt like being married to a locked room. Micah was the sun between us. A curious, sensitive kid with a heart too big for his age. He asked questions constantly about animals, the universe, how ovens work. But as he got older, his questions turned more personal. Mom, did Dad have a dog when he was little? Why don't we ever go to Dad's hometown? Is Grandpa Elias dead? Did we go to the funeral? That last one caught me off guard. I realized I didn't know. Caleb had never told me when his father passed. No obituary, no mention. Just silence. A void where a family legacy should have been. I started to feel a weight in the silence. Not grief, something heavier, like shame or guilt. I couldn't tell whose it was. I remember one night last fall, curled up on the couch with my best friend Jenna, glass of red wine in hand, whispering things I'd never said out loud. I don't think I really know him, I told her. Like, I know what kind of pizza he likes, but I don't know why he flinches when I mention his father, or why he doesn't keep a single photo of the house he grew up in. Jenna looked at me over the rim of her glass. Serena, you think he's hiding something? I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe. But it's been so many years now, I don't even know what I'd be looking for. The truth is, I had built my life on a foundation I never examined too closely. I didn't want to be the wife who snooped, who pried. I wanted to believe that if something was important, Caleb would share it. That trust was something you gave and grew, not something you constantly tested. But that trust, I would learn, wasn't mutual. And one dusty envelope, found by my son, not me, would prove just how much had been hidden, how much I had chosen not to see. Micah had been begging for a gaming corner in the basement for months, and I finally gave in. We were going to clear out the back wall, mostly old holiday boxes, worn-out baby gear, some random junk we hadn't looked at in years. It was the kind of task you keep putting off until your kid shows up with a label maker and a determined face. I was kneeling on the cold concrete floor sorting a tangled mess of Christmas lights when I heard him say, "Whoa! What's this?" He was over by the water heater, digging through a box I didn't even recognize, taped shut with duct tape, corners sagging with age. It wasn't labeled. That was odd. I usually write on everything. Micah pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed, stiff and formal looking. It had Caleb's full name handwritten across the front in cursive. Elegant, old-school cursive, not Caleb's handwriting. "Mom?" he asked, holding it up. "Is this important?" I walked over, brushing dust off my jeans, and took it gently from his hands. My heart skipped, just a tiny flutter I couldn't explain. The paper felt expensive, heavy. Inside the box were more papers. A few looked like tax forms, others were printed on letterhead. I spotted a signature, Elias Blake. My breath caught. I hadn't heard that name, let alone seen it on paper, in years. "Micah, why don't you hand me the rest of the papers?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We'll go through them together." He crouched beside me, sifting carefully. "These look like lawyer letters or something. Is this Grandpa Elias's stuff?" There it was, that name again, Grandpa Elias, a man who existed in Caleb's past like a rumor, vague, unreachable, unanswered. I opened one document slowly. It was a letter from a law firm based in Charleston. The letter was dated 7 years ago, shortly after Elias died, apparently. It confirmed the transfer of ownership of a property, a very large property, a historic home, the kind people give names to, the kind of place that ends up in estate magazines. The second document was a will. Caleb's name was listed as sole beneficiary. I froze. I had no idea this even existed. No clue Caleb had inherited a home, not just any home, but a sizable estate, let alone never told me about it. We weren't struggling financially, but we certainly weren't living like people who had $1 million properties sitting in their name. Micah glanced at me, eyes wide. "Is this why Dad never talks about Grandpa's house?" I looked at him, this bright-eyed, big-hearted boy. I didn't want him to see me break. I didn't want him to carry the weight of my anger or confusion. So I smiled, not out of happiness, but out of instinct. I couldn't give him the truth yet, not all at once. "Let's ask him," I said. He blinked. "When?" I zipped the documents back into the envelope and tucked them into my bag. "At his birthday dinner." Micah's eyebrows shot up. "For real?" I nodded. "For real." Inside, I was already spinning. Years of questions raced through my mind. Why hide this? What else had he lied about? What was he planning to do with that house? And why did he keep it from me, from us? It wasn't just the house. It was the deception. The idea that Caleb looked at that will, saw that property in his name, and decided to bury it in a box next to old tax forms and baby toys like it meant nothing. Or worse, like we meant nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up at the kitchen table long after Micah went to bed, the envelope sitting in front of me like a loaded gun. Jenna called after work and I told her everything. She was silent for a beat, then softly, "Serena, what are you going to do?" I stared at the envelope. I had a choice. I could confront Caleb quietly, just the two of us. Give him the chance to lie again, spin some story about why he forgot to tell me, or I want him to explain it, I said, out loud, in front of people who love him, people who trust him. "Are you sure?" she asked. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "He's lied in private long enough. Let's see how it sounds in the light." I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I just wanted the truth, and I wanted it somewhere it couldn't hide. The guest list for Caleb's birthday dinner was already set. His brother, his sister-in-law, our closest friends. A perfect audience. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in silence, and stared at the man I thought I married, suddenly made stranger by a secret I never imagined he was capable of. I've never been the kind of woman who plays games. Even when I'm angry, I like things clean, direct. But this time, I needed the weight of the truth to land, not in a screaming match, not behind closed doors where Caleb could dodge, deflect, or disarm with one of his carefully measured silences. No, I wanted it to be undeniable, in the light, in the presence of people who knew him, people he respected, people he couldn't lie to with ease. So I chose his birthday. Caleb turns 42 on the second Tuesday of May. We've hosted a dinner every year. Nothing fancy, just friends, his brother Darren and Darren's wife Emily, and a couple of our longtime neighbors. Steak, red wine, laughter, too much pie. I knew how the night usually went. I also knew how much Caleb liked control. and how rattled he gets when something doesn't go exactly the way he planned. I wanted him rattled. 3 days before the dinner, I cleaned the house like it was going to be appraised by royalty. Not because I cared what people thought, but because I wanted no distractions. I wanted everything else to feel perfect, normal. I picked up his favorite bottle of Pinot Noir, ordered his cake from the bakery that always misspells our name. This year, I didn't bother correcting them. And laid out the table with the good silver we only used twice a year. Micah watched me with quiet curiosity. I could tell he didn't fully understand what was coming, but he sensed it. The shift, the quiet charge in the air. "Are you sure we're really going to do this?" he asked that morning as I ironed the cloth napkins. "Yes," I said without looking up. "It's time your father told the truth, not just to us, to himself." Micah nodded, solemn and thoughtful in that way only a 13-year-old who's seen too much too soon can be. On the afternoon of the dinner, I took the envelope, the one we found in the basement, and placed it carefully inside a blank birthday card. Just one sentence written inside. "Happy birthday. Here's what you didn't think I'd ever find." I sealed it. Put it in an envelope with his name. No decoration, just truth. I slipped it under his birthday card pile, second from the top. The guests arrived just before 6. Darren hugged me like always, cracking a joke about Caleb getting old. Emily brought a bottle of Chardonnay and a salad I knew no one would touch. Jenna was the last to arrive. She kissed my cheek and squeezed my hand just long enough for me to know she had my back. Caleb was in high spirits. He loved being the center of attention, but only when it was on his terms. He lit the grill like a man in charge, laughing with Darren, making jokes about retirement even though we both knew he wasn't even close. He had no idea what was coming. We ate outside, under the patio lights. The air was warm and conversation was easy. Micah sat beside me, unusually quiet, eyes flicking between his father and the envelope sitting untouched near the cake. When the plates were cleared and the pie was served, I said, "Micah has a birthday question." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Am I getting roasted?" Micah looked at me, then at his father. He took a deep breath and said, "Dad, why don't we ever talk about Grandpa's house?" The entire table went still. Caleb chuckled nervously. What house?" I reached for the envelope and handed it to him across the table. "This one," I said. "Maybe you'll remember after reading your card." He stared at it, and for the first time in years, I saw Caleb truly hesitate. His fingers hovered above the seal like they might burn him. He opened it slowly, pulled out the card, read my note, then the documents. His face changed, subtly but undeniably. The blood drained from his cheeks. His hands trembled. His lips parted. No sound came out. Darren leaned forward. "What is it?" I said nothing. This wasn't my story to tell anymore. I'd set the table. I'd poured the wine. I'd passed him the truth. Now it was Caleb's turn to speak. Caleb didn't speak right away. He just sat there, holding the documents like they might fall apart in his hands. The edges curled slightly where his thumbs pressed down, and I saw his knuckles tighten with each passing second. The silence was thick, not the awkward kind, the kind that pulls gravity to the center of the room. You could hear forks scrape against plates. A wine glass clinked softly when someone shifted. Darren leaned forward, brow furrowed. "What is it, Caleb?" Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable, caught somewhere between panic and calculation. I knew that look. I'd seen it before when I asked questions he didn't want to answer, but this time he had nowhere to hide. He cleared his throat. "It's nothing, just old paperwork." I laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly. Just enough to make him know I wasn't going to let him slide. "Old paperwork? That's what we're calling $1 million estate now?" Emily's fork dropped onto her plate with a soft clatter. Darren looked between us, confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Micah sat beside me, staring at his dad with wide eyes. Jenna didn't move. Her face was calm, but I could see the alertness in her posture. She knew this was the moment. I looked directly at Caleb. "Tell them, Caleb. Tell your brother what you inherited. Tell your son why you've spent years pretending your father left you nothing." Caleb's jaw tensed. His eyes shifted to Darren, then to Micah, then back to the papers. Finally, he spoke. "My father and I, didn't end on good terms. Darren scoffed. We all knew that, but that doesn't explain why you told us the will was empty. Caleb looked genuinely uncomfortable now. His voice dropped a notch. I didn't want the drama. I didn't want to fight over something none of us earned. Don't insult us, I said, sharper than I expected. You didn't tell anyone. Not your brother. Not me. You didn't just keep the house. You buried it in a box in our basement and pretended it never happened. For what? Control? His eyes flicked toward Micah, and I saw the weight of his son's gaze finally settle on him. Micah's voice was quiet, but it cut through everything. You lied to Mom. Caleb flinched. Then he let out a breath and finally admitted what I'd known deep down, but needed to hear aloud. I didn't want to share it, he said. Not with my brother, not with anyone. That house, it was the one thing I could have for myself. Something untouched. Something that didn't come with strings or expectations. But it did come with lies, I said. You didn't just keep it from Darren, you kept it from me, from your son. You built our life with one hand while hiding the truth with the other. Emily looked stunned. Caleb, that property could have changed everything. What were you planning to do with it? He shrugged. I don't know. I thought maybe I'd renovate it, retire there someday. It just felt like mine. You mean secret, I said. It felt secret, and you liked it that way. Darren pushed his chair back from the table, disgusted. You let me believe Dad cut us all out. You watched me struggle through Mom's medical bills and never said a word. Caleb tried to speak, but Darren held up a hand. No, he said. You don't get to talk right now. You've had years to say something. Micah stood up slowly, his chair scraping across the patio. I looked up the house, he said, eyes locked on Caleb. It's beautiful, and you kept it like a ghost story. I don't get it. Caleb opened his mouth, but again no words came, just guilt, cold and visible. And that was it. The Caleb I thought I knew, the quiet, stable man I built a life with, wasn't gone. He was never real. He was curated, selective, and now exposed. I placed my napkin on the table and stood. I don't care about the house, Caleb. I care that you made a decision to lie. You made it for all of us. You made it every day you walked past that box in the basement. I looked around the table. Jenna gave me the smallest nod. Darren looked like he was trying not to scream. Emily stared at the tablecloth like it might explain something. And Micah just looked broken. I'm done pretending, I said. Then I turned to go inside, not waiting for Caleb to follow. He didn't, and that told me everything I needed to know. The silence in the house after everyone left that night was deafening. Caleb didn't come to bed. I didn't expect him to. He sat outside alone, staring into the dark yard like answers might be buried out there. I could hear the creak of his chair on the deck, the occasional clink of his whiskey glass on the railing. But no footsteps, no apologies, just stillness. And that was louder than anything he could have said. The next morning, I got up before the sun. I made coffee, packed Micah's lunch, folded the laundry I hadn't touched in 2 days. I moved through the motions like I was still married to the idea of us, but I wasn't. Micah sat at the counter, unusually quiet. He finally asked, "Are you and Dad going to be okay?" I looked at him, this boy who had unknowingly lit the fuse, who asked a simple question that unraveled years of hidden truths. "No," I said gently. "But you and I are going to be just fine." He didn't cry. He just nodded and picked at his cereal. I think part of him had always known something didn't feel right between us. Kids have a sixth sense for that sort of thing. Later that day, Caleb tried to talk. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen with his hands in his pockets like a teenager caught skipping class. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. I stared at him. "You didn't just hurt me, Caleb. You betrayed me. You lied for years. Not once. Not in a moment of weakness, over and over again. I thought I was protecting something. Your ego?" He winced. "Number my independence, my identity, that house, that inheritance. It was the only thing in my life that wasn't touched by expectations. I put my mug down harder than I meant to. Do you hear yourself? You were married. We built a life, raised a child, and you think the most meaningful parts of your life should be hidden from the people who live it with you?" He didn't answer. A week later, I moved out. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No shouting, no slamming doors. I signed a short-term lease on a small rental 2 towns over, close to my sister. I packed Micah's things slowly, carefully, with his help. He wanted to bring his telescope and his sketch pad. He left most of his toys behind. The hardest part was explaining to him that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes love means leaving, because staying would be lying too. Caleb tried to offer me money, not just from his regular account, but from the estate. I declined. This was never about the house, I told him. You didn't lose me because you kept a property. You lost me because you built a wall and then locked us out. Jenna helped me move. She didn't ask questions, just showed up with boxes and wine and her typical dry humor. You always had better taste in curtains than in men, she joked. We laughed, really laughed. For the first time in days. And in the quiet of my new place, after Micah fell asleep on the couch with a book on his chest, I finally exhaled. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel strong. I felt clear. I'd spent years loving a man who treated truth like a luxury, something optional, only shared when convenient. I convinced myself that silence was maturity, that avoidance was peace. But silence can be manipulation. And avoidance? That's just fear dressed up as stoicism. Caleb hasn't tried to contact me since the move. I think he knows there's nothing left to say. The last time I saw him was during a custody handoff at a gas station. He looked tired, older, as if the truth aged him faster than the lie ever did. Micah hugged him goodbye, then slid into my car. As we drove off, he asked, "Do you think he regrets it?" I thought about that for a moment. "Probably," I said. But sometimes, people regret getting caught more than they regret the lie. Micah nodded and looked out the window. I'm glad we found the envelope. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Me too. Because that envelope didn't just hold a deed. It held a mirror, one Caleb refused to look into. But I did. And what I saw was a woman who finally stopped settling for half-truths dressed as stability. In the end, he kept the house. But I got my peace. And that was worth far more than anything in his name. Some people think betrayal only happens when someone cheats or walks away. But the quiet lies, the secrets hidden in basements, in silence, in choices made without you, those can shatter you just the same. In the end, I didn't confront Caleb to hurt him. I confronted him to stop hurting myself. Because when someone you love hides something that big, that deliberately, for that long, it's not about the thing they hid. It's about the version of you they thought would never find it. The version they didn't believe was strong enough to know the truth. Well, I found it. And now I know. And if you're in a situation where something doesn't feel right, where you're being kept in the dark, don't ignore that feeling. You don't have to kick down doors, but you do have the right to ask questions. You deserve answers. Truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in an envelope, or a single sentence, or a birthday dinner that goes completely off script. But once it arrives, it doesn't leave. And neither should your self-respect. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of someone you care about, go ahead and like this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts, experiences, or even your own stories. Drop them in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, or you just think it's a story worth sharing, send it their way. Most importantly, if you want more real stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're building a space where honesty, healing, and human stories matter. Thanks for being here. I'm Serena, and I'm done pretending.